Today's video comes from the Art Coaching Club podcast. Be sure to subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts to never miss an episode. So today I'm really excited to talk to you about how do we actually find a style and how long does it actually take? And so the reason I'm talking about this is because I have talked to so many artists this week, especially about frustrations with feeling like they don't have a brand yet, or they don't know their story yet, or they don't know, who they're reaching, or, all the things we talk about all the time. And the reason I thought this would be interesting is because I feel like I'm hearing the same thing over and over again for a lot of people that are kind of at that point where they don't know what their style is yet. And so today I kind of want to talk about, one, how to think about a style, how to think about a brand. Like first, just like what are these things and how to think about them. And then two, I want to talk about what are mistakes that I see a lot of people making, and not even like you're doing something wrong, but maybe you're not thinking about these things correctly and you're not going at it with the right approach, because I think that's where I'm seeing a lot of frustrations and burnout is people just either mentally not approaching it right or just physically not doing the right things to find a style to build a brand. And then after that, I want to go into what works, obviously. I don't want to just talk about what doesn't. So what works really well, what are different things to think about, and then just, kind of other thoughts I have based on my conversations with a lot of y'all and just, different stuff that's going on. So to start, let's dive into what is a style. And yes, my second podcast episode was finding your personal style. So highly recommend listening to the second podcast episode I ever did, because I touch on this in much more detail. It's, I think, 20-ish minutes of me just talking about style. But, a style is what you're known for. And I think so many artists struggle with this concept of like, I want people to see the piece and know it's me. And yes, don't we all want that? But I think where people get caught up is I have to paint either the same thing over and over again, the same color over and over again, the same subject. Like I need to be so specific that people, 100% of the time know it's me. But I think what I would say is think about the artists who no matter what they do, it's them. I mean, let's talk about, there's Teal Duncan, there's Ashley Longshore, Monet. It's not that they're painting the exact same thing over and over and over again. It might be the voice or the tone of their work. Like an Ashley Longshore is very loud and kind of in your face and bright colors, but she's painting everything under the sun. But then, or is it the way you hold the brush, the texture you use, the materials, it needs to be more than just the materials, but you know what I'm saying? Like the overall kind of vibe that you're giving off with your work. Or is it the color palette and it's really muted and it's something that you always really stick with? Like I think there's going to be similarities because visually we are drawn to certain things. So you're going to find that you are not painting the same, you don't have to paint the same thing over and over again. You're going to start seeing some similarities and some through lines through all your work. But that takes time. It takes exploration. It takes taking classes or courses or just getting in the studio. And so what I would recommend is don't constrain it. I think so many artists start off with, I want to find what my style is, therefore I can only do one thing. And if you do that, that will 100% stifle your creativity. It's the opposite of what you want to do. So I'm going to talk to kind of what some of those mistakes are. But before I do that, I want to talk about what is a brand. And I think this is related because obviously branding is very much related to your style. So when I think of a brand, I think about, and sometimes I think it's helpful to think about a company versus an artist, because if you think about an artist, you're going to think about their work. But if you think about a brand, like let's say Anthropologie, like they have a very different feel than J. Crew. And so it's kind of like, okay, maybe someone might shop at both, but if I'm shopping at both, I'm shopping at them for different reasons. And it's because they're both might have a white t-shirt, but the person that buys a white t-shirt from J. Crew might look different than the person who buys a white t-shirt from Anthropologie. So you have to think about that. And so yes, you might attract people that aren't exactly your ideal customer and in your brand, but you want to build a brand that speaks so clearly to one person and tells so exactly who you are that people really resonate with it. And that's how you kind of develop a style as well, because if you have a very clear brand and your work fits into that brand, you're also developing a style. It all works together. So when it comes to developing your brand, I like to think of three things. You want to think about yourself because you want to be authentically yourself. You don't want to be, you know, trying to be someone that you're not. And so I want you to think about who you are, and you can amplify certain parts of yourself. You don't have to be authentically yourself. That doesn't mean sharing every nitty-gritty detail about who you are. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of things that you don't know about me. I mean, I feel like a lot of people, I'll coach them and they'll say, I feel like I know you from the podcast or from, you know, the membership or from whatever it is, but you know, it's not like you know the whole me. And so it's thinking about what persona do you want to put forward? And obviously, like as a coach, I want to put forward that I'm intelligent about the things I'm talking about, that I care about the arts, that I'm personable and someone you're going to want to work with frequently if I'm, you know, coming at you from a coaching perspective, or someone you're going to want to listen to every week if I'm coming at you from a podcasting perspective. But for you as an artist, it's, you know, who are you and what parts of yourself do you want to amplify? You want to think about your work. And so when you're thinking about your artwork, just think about, even if you don't have a style yet, are there common threads? You know, are you using certain colors? Are you using certain palettes? Like that's going to influence your brand. If you are a loud, boisterous Ashley Longshore type artist, you don't need to have like a light blue and like pastel brand. Like you probably want something that's a little loud and in your face. And you probably want your tone to be a little loud and in your face. So thinking through first, you know, who you are authentically, what the work is, and then the third piece is who is your ideal customer. And the reason this is so important is because you need to know who they are so that you better know how to speak to them. So when it comes to, you know, being your authentic self, like for me, I know for the most part the types of people I'm trying to reach, the types of people I'm trying to coach, the types of people I'm trying to speak to through this podcast. I'm not trying to reach everyone. I'm not even trying to reach every artist. You know, I'm trying to reach artists with specific struggles that resonate with certain things that I feel like fit my brand and relate to me. But through understanding who my ideal customer is, I can project certain parts of myself that are going to relate to them, both through my branding and through, you know, who I am. And so for you, it's when you're thinking about, you know, doing an Instagram post, for example, you want your post to visually go with, you know, the story you're telling, who you are, what your audience wants to see. You want your tone to speak to the audience, to answer their needs, to answer questions before they ask, but also be in a voice that sounds like you, but also is fitting this brand image, and also sounds like the kind of voice that's going to be coming from your artwork. You know, you want to really make sure everything takes those three pieces into account. So just to summarize, you know, you want to think about yourself, your artwork, and your ideal customer. And that's what a brand is. So to develop that, what I like to say is it's going to come with time. You're going to want to really study your work. You're going to really, really want to think about yourself, and you're going to want to really think about your customer. And so that's something I work on with a lot of clients. You know, we really dive deep into your ideal customer. I have that worksheet it's a pop-up on my website. So highly recommend taking that. And like, it's not, you're going to sit down and do it in 10 minutes. It's like, you might work on it for 5 minutes, walk away, come back to it. It's going to be changing forever, but like, you're going to get a clearer and clearer idea of who this customer is. It's not like any of this is set in stone. So you want to think about that. You want to think about, you know, who you are. Write down 5 words that describe you. You know, write down, you know, all these different things that are who you are. And then I want you to write down a list of words that describe your artwork. And, you know, don't say it's blue. Like, get a little bit deeper than that. You know, is it playful? Is it quiet? Is it loud? You know, words like that. So those two, and then write down the words that describe your customer, and then what is in the middle. And I want you to narrow it down to 3 words, and those 3 words should indicate every piece of content you put out, the way you speak, the way things visually look, all of that. And then that needs to be reflected everywhere. And also know you're not trapped. I think that's the biggest mistake and the biggest fear I see in artists is they're like, well, if I commit, you know, to this, I can't ever change it. And it's like, you can. I don't know how many of you remember, but before the Scouted Studio, the website was called Straight to Art and had a different name, had a completely different visuals. At that time, I think I was only working with Charleston artists. It was just totally different, and I rebranded. And I don't think it didn't do anything but benefit. So know that you're also not trapped, but you obviously want to put, you know, time into doing it right the first time. So now let's dive into kind of getting back to the heart of this, because I went off on a little tangent there. How do we actually find our style? And so what are some mistakes I'm seeing and I'm hearing a lot of you say? And I think the biggest thing is we think about this stuff I just talked about. So you're like, well, I know who I am, and I know the customers I want to reach. Like, maybe you don't really know your customers, but you're like, oh, I just want it to be like a person of a certain wealth that likes pretty things. And I'm like, you got to get a little more specific than that. But they have this idea in their mind. And so then they're like, well, I know these types of paintings sell, so I'm going to only do that. And so what I think the issue here is you're refining too quickly and you're limiting yourself too quickly, and you're thinking of a style versus developing a style, or you're kind of creating your brand versus watching it evolve. And so what we need to do as artists is instead create tons and tons and tons of work. And it's not lost on me that creating work is expensive, and so I understand the need to sell. I'm not avoiding that. I think it is important, but there are ways to do that and to sell your work while you're still exploring. And the ultimate goal is to get to a point where you are a household name and you have a strong brand. And it's okay if it was a little rough getting there, but the only way you're going to get there is by continually creating. So first, you need to not limit yourself, because I think so many people put themselves in this box because they're like, well, I know I want my brand to look like this, and so I need to only create artwork that looks like that. And so I think what the problem is we refine so much, but you don't want to refine and tighten down before you start. You should not know your style before it exists. And so this is a conversation I had with multiple coaching clients this week, and we were talking about, because I don't think people realize they're doing it. They're like, Haley, I'm trying. And I'm like, I believe you. But I think the problem is we are artists. We are creatives. We do not fit in boxes. We are literally told to think outside of the box. And so when we're telling ourselves, my style has to fit inside this tiny little box, it is crushing our creativity. And so I'm going to say some kind of unconventional advice, and it's let control the reins for a little bit. Do not think about followers. Do not think about sales. Do not think about anything, and just go create. And I talk about unstructured creative time a lot, but that is because that's how you're going to create good work. Whereas if you are so focused on the end goal, you're not going to do the correct steps to get you there. So for example, if you're so focused on selling, you're not going to take the right steps to produce the work that's ultimately going to sell, provide longevity to your business, allow you to get your prices to a point that allows you to really be profitable. Like, you really have to do the work up front, which is hard. And art is a long game. And that's something I tell so many people. I'm like, the reason I do one-on-one coaching and the reason I have a membership versus a course is because I tried a course, I've been there, but it's because it's a long game, and it's ever changing. Like, the advice you need, it's not like I can say, and here's a course and you'll be a successful artist by the end. There's no one right way to do things. So you need someone that can work with you, get to know you. But two, it's going to be ever evolving. I mean, we've even seen that with the rise of, Instagram is amazing, and now the algorithm, and it's like everything's constantly changing. So why are we kind of coming back? Why are we so focused on finding something so quickly when that's really just not how this business works? And so what does work? This is where it gets a little more interesting. So remember when you were creating just to create? There was a point in every single one of our lives. It could be when you're a kid. A lot of people are like, I've been an artist for forever. Or when you had another job and this was just your hobby. Or when you just picked up a paintbrush and you realized, oh wow, like I'm actually good at this. Like, before the people wanted to pay for it, before people started reaching out for commissions, before any of this crossed your mind, like, what were you creating and why? And why did you enjoy it? And I think you need to find little ways to get back to that every day or every week. And that's where, unstructured creative time comes in. Yes, it's really hard to do that mental shift. And it might take you working outside or getting outside of your studio or getting outside of your place of business if you're, a little bit further in your career. Or if you're not, it might just take, on Fridays, I only create for myself. And I think that's so important, because if you're really looking to find a style, you have to create for yourself. You cannot create for anyone else. And so that means not worrying about followers, because they will come, not getting caught up in growth, because it will happen, not worrying about success, ironically, because success is what success is, and this is how I define it. It's not a certain number on a page. It's not how much money you make. It's not how many galleries you're in. It's what is going to make you happy. So ask yourself, like, at the end of the day, why do I want my business to succeed? Is it more time at home? Is it to be able to spend more time with my family? Is it to be able to afford my family a vacation? Is it, to pay for my kids' preschool? Is it to contribute? Is it to, get this out of me because I have to create, but I just don't have room to have all these paintings? Is it, I have something to prove and I do want to make a certain amount of money, but it's more that I want to prove that I'm good at this. What does success look like for you, and what is going to ultimately get you there? And I want you to think about that versus I need to create work that is going to make me money right now. I instead want you to think about, how can I create work that is going to better me as a whole, that is truly me. And when you think of it that way and you're creating work and you're just letting it flow, one, the work's going to be better. Yes, you're going to make some really bad stuff, but you're going to make some really good stuff. And two, if it's not coming from a place of what should I be doing, and instead it's coming from a place of what just naturally comes out of me, it's going to be more authentic. You're not going to be looking to what other artists are doing, what's selling. And ultimately, that's how your style is going to develop. But to be truthful, it's going to take a really long time. It doesn't happen overnight. And it comes from, for me, it's like I remember I did some projects in school when I was in school, and I started to notice certain colors I always used. And then I would take random commissions, and I started kind of being like, oh, I really like drawing this type of way, or I really like this type of subject matter. And a style evolves, but it came from all of those things. And I don't think you're ever set in a style. I just think it sort of builds on itself over time. And so I think you have to stop overthinking everything you create. And I think you also need to really stop looking at what other artists are doing. I know this is like so backwards, but I think so many artists, their biggest mistake is scrolling through on Instagram. And I was talking to someone about this recently, and I do it too. And I just save. I'm like, oh, love this, love this, love this. Like mood board, Pinterest board, Instagram saves, images on my desktop. And it's like, if you look to what other people are doing so often, it's going to be really hard for those not to intrude your own thoughts and ideas. And no, I don't think anyone is trying to copy anyone else. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the problem. Sometimes it is. But it's also, how can you create authentically if you're constantly bombarded with what other people are doing, what's succeeding in the market and what's not? Because you're going to think about, okay, well, she painted flowers and they did really well. So like maybe I don't always paper, maybe I do flowers. Versus if you had come into the studio with a fresh mind, maybe you would have wanted to paint a cow. I don't know. And so I would say there's nothing wrong with following other artists. Obviously, we pull from other people and we pull from what's around us. So I'm not saying that's going to completely go away. I just think don't inundate yourself with what other artists are doing that's allowing them success. I would say that can be really stifling. Instead, like what I do is I'll look at like really beautiful interior design. I'll look at really beautiful fashion. And like sometimes I will look at other artists, but artists that are doing things so differently than what I would be doing. And I pull textures, or I pull colors, or obviously I rep a lot of artists with the Scouted Studio. I coach a lot of artists. I'm looking at art all day. But when it comes to my own artwork, if I am looking at their work, I'm pulling, what do I really love about this? Not the piece as a whole. Maybe it's this one specific corner, this one specific green, or this one specific blue, or this one specific brush stroke, and how can I build something completely off that? And so I think thinking of it that way is also going to prevent you from getting into that mindset of like, well, this is what other people are doing to be successful. How can I do something similar? And even if it's not similar, like I'm going to copy them, it's still similar. Like, how can I kind of pull some of that success for myself? And so instead kind of open your mind to like, what do I want to create? And so I think hopefully that will also take some of that pressure off. Well, I also kind of want to drop this on you. Artists, real artists, do not paint one thing every day for the rest of their lives. I don't know anyone that does that. And I was talking to someone about this. We were talking about, our teacher used to give us side projects. They're called we had a funny name for them, but I can't remember. And they were our little side projects. They were what we worked on between our big, thesis projects and stuff like that in school. And I was talking to an artist recently, and she's very established. I won't name drop her, but a lot of you would probably recognize her style. You're like, she does a lot of the same stuff over and over again. She kind of, has a little bit of diversification gallery to gallery that she works with, but she's like, Haley, I create so much work that no one sees. She's like, I can't paint the same thing over and over again. And so she's like, it actually allows me to get better when I'm painting other things because I know I can go off and like do a little scribble or something. And so I think the artists that paint one thing over and over again and they call themselves artists, they're marketers. And I'm not saying they're not talented, but a lot of the time that's marketing. You're like, if you can sell, that's selling a product, you know? So it's a little bit of a different frame of mind. And so I think true artists, to really be happy, a lot of us, we have to explore. And so finding our voice versus finding our subject. So think about, how can I explore? How can I find what I really love? It's going to come from painting more. And so instead of refining before you start, I want you to paint as much as you can and then refine as you go. And then ask yourself, how can I build upon what's working? So again, coming back to that idea of who am I, what do I like to create, and who's my customer? Put something out there, put a bunch of stuff out there, put it on your stories, put it on Instagram, ask polls, do whatever, and then say, okay, I had a launch, for example, only 2 pieces sold. What about these pieces maybe made them sell over these other ones? Were they in a certain palette? Were they a certain subject? Were they a certain design? How can I do more work like this? So it's doing a lot, taking almost like analytics and doing more of what works. And then, so it's kind of coming at it from a mindset of how can I niche down after creating a lot versus starting small and trying to fit all of these ideas, like what's going to fit in this tiny little box I've developed for myself. So it's really about starting big and then getting smaller. So I think, kind of concluding a lot of these ideas, it's how do we want to work strategically over time to get us to a style? Because, as you're hearing me say throughout this episode, it's difficult and it's going to take a long time. And so what I think the strategy is to, if you have work that's selling, obviously, like, I'm a business coach. I care about the business. I care about the financials. 80% of your time goes to that. Create commissions, create the work that's selling. That's great. But when it comes to, like, I still want to develop a style, 20% of your time needs to be unstructured, creative, create bad work. It doesn't need to be perfect. See what comes of it. Explore different ideas. Explore stuff vastly out of your, typical work, like, and see what happens. And then kind of learn as you go and gain insights and then refine. Don't refine too quickly. Just keep reiterating that. I also really want to share, I think this is so important, and I know people know this deep down, but I feel like it has to be reiterated, and I feel like I need to reiterate it to myself. It is okay to create work just for you. That is okay. I was telling someone that today, and she does all kinds of different stuff, and we were talking about, and she was like, well, I really want to explore this type of work, but, like, it just does not fit what I'm selling. And she's in a great place where she has, a membership and some automation set up that she's making enough kind of just baseline from some of these things that she has to not have to stress so much about what she's creating. And so I was kind of like, creating on top of those things. So she has a little bit of flexibility. And so I said, what if you took 20% of your time and you created those things and you didn't show anyone? Like, how would that make you feel? And she goes, it's almost a breath of fresh air. Like, I could just create to create again. And I was like, yes. And if they're good, sure, you can sell them. I don't care, but, like, challenge yourself not to. And just create some stuff to create. And that's how your brand's going to come. That's how things are going to develop. That's how you're going to get more creative. But I think the flip side to that is, don't be afraid to share some of your stuff that maybe doesn't fit exactly. I know, I've seen some artists have drastic transformation in what they're creating, and it comes from pushing them or them pushing themselves to take the risk to put something out there that's very different than what they typically do. And sometimes that one thing that's very different, that one story, that one little mention of something they do that's really different was the thing that catapulted their career, because all of a sudden that's what everyone wanted. And I'm not saying it has to be that way. Sometimes it could just be, look, like, hey, I'm real, I'm an artist, I paint other stuff, or sometimes it could be, what do y'all think? I think it's just breaking the stigma that everything we create has to be perfect and good and clean and, clean lines, like white edges, everything is perfect. Like, no, we're artists. Things should be messy. Things should be imperfect. Things should be, progressive, and we're learning as we go. And so I think getting over that hump is so important. And so the 2 pieces, again, to reiterate, is it's okay to create work just for yourself. It's okay to never show it. It's okay to never sell it. I mean, I was talking to an artist who came on the podcast recently, and she was saying, I have work that I painted and it's just in my house and I don't want to sell it. And I have some work like that too. And that's wonderful. And it's, some of my favorite pieces that I probably should sell because I want them in my home because I think they're the best pieces I've done. but that's okay that I don't want to sell them. It's okay, and it's coming to that conclusion. And then, the part two, that if you are painting something that's outside what you're doing, it's also okay to share it. We don't have to put ourselves in these boxes. And then, this is something kind of to conclude all of this, is not everything has to be an immediate sell. And I feel like I talked about this with Meg Indy. I've talked about this with a lot of artists, and it is an investment. Art is an investment. You want it to be something that people live with for forever, and it travels with them from home to home, rental to rental, like throughout these different parts of their lives. Like maybe they buy it when they're young and then it stays in their house until later, or maybe they buy a print from you and they are clients that grow with you. And so it's a long-term investment. And I think we're looking at it as, I want things to sell immediately. And we live in this fast-paced environment where everything is based on immediate gratification. We're seeing all these artists do launches, which from a marketing perspective, I think launches are great. This is not me hating on them. But I think when you see it all the time and you're like, oh my gosh, everyone's selling out, we have this, thought in our head that they're like, well, why isn't my art selling really quickly? Well, if you're selling expensive, large art, or even if it's not expensive, art is an investment. And sometimes things finding the perfect right home that needs it and loves it, where it's going to be absolutely perfect, takes time. And so I have some pieces that haven't sold for 3 years, and then they'll sell. And that doesn't, yes, I've had moments where I'm like, oh, they're not good, maybe. But now I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, change of mindset. If they take a long time to sell, it just means they haven't found their perfect person yet. They haven't been in front of their perfect person yet. I don't have that, crazy amount of followers. There could be so many more people in this world that are just not seeing what I have yet. And so it's understanding that not everything has to be an immediate success. And sometimes it's, as Lauren Beer said on her podcast, it's planting seeds. And so what seeds can I plant now so that I'm getting even better customers in the future that are going to love this work even more than the people that are seeing it now? And it's like, how can I continue to plant those seeds? And I think the takeaway with that is, how can we understand that our artwork should not be judged based on if it is immediately sold, immediately gets a bunch of hits, immediately gets a bunch of comments, or not? I think we really have to get back to asking ourselves, is this good? And yes, outside gratification is important. It's important for analytics. It's important, I understand that. But I also think the way we feel is really important. And I think we have to learn to be our own advocates and also learn our own guts. I mean, we're artists. If you think your work is good, which hopefully you do, if you don't, sign up for a one-on-one. We need to talk about that. But if you think your artwork is good, someone else is going to as well. And so, if at the heart of it, you're creating work that you think is good, you're going to find the audience. And that's how a style is going to develop. So to really bring it full circle, it's create the work for yourself. Take the time. Don't put yourself in a box. Create, instead of a box, like create everything and then refine down based on what you think is the best of what you're creating, patterns you're noticing as you start to get to know your ideal customer, who they are, all of those things. And then start to see, okay, also, how does this fit in with my brand? And then all of a sudden it starts to come together. And so I think really to develop a style, it's all about letting yourself create, noticing patterns, and then refining down. And so I think if you can take anything away from this episode, it's that. It's that style takes time. It's not developed overnight. And it comes from what I just said. It comes from creating a lot. So if for you, that's hard, and it's hard to get out of that scarcity mindset, and it's hard to get out of the, well, I don't have places for all this work, or I don't have the money to buy all these supplies, start small. In art class, we are given a sketchbook, and we're taught, in art school to sketch every day. Get back to that. You're creating and you're exploring doesn't have to be on a large canvas. It can be if that, if that's possible for you, and you could just maybe continually paint over it and gesso over it every time and start over. Or if you have the space, just let them stack up. Or, maybe your exploring is better suited to be something like a sketchbook where it's low input cost and you can really do a lot of work and you can draw on it every day. And the thing I love about a sketchbook is you can see progression. So you can look at where you were if you date them, which I used to do, and you can see progression too, which I think is really exciting. So I hope you found this podcast interesting and helpful. But really, I just hope it clears the air and kind of helps you all understand that not everybody has it figured out. I mean, I even talked to some artists that I feel like have it figured out, and then they're like, I feel like I don't know my style at all. So we're all kind of in this boat trying to figure it out together. But I think it's important to, one, normalize that, and two, put this information out there of what I feel like the patterns I'm seeing not work and the patterns I'm seeing potentially work. So I hope this is a helpful episode, little bonus solo, and I hope you really enjoy it and you get comfortable creating work that is different and new, and you get back to being excited, because otherwise you will get burnout, and I don't want that. And so really get back to the heart of why you're creating, and your work will get better.